Hello, I'm Josephine Mead, the Associate Producer and Stage Manager for That Which Was Once Familiar, Zoë Bastin's upcoming performance for Dancehouse. We meet today at Chunky Move on the unceded lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. We feel blessed to present work and converse on country that carries such strong traditions of dancing, making and storytelling. This project is being presented by Dancehouse and Bus Projects in association with Midsummer Festival. The project has been generously supported by Yarra City Arts and is being live streamed today from Chunky Move by Bus Projects, thanks to ongoing support from Shannon Goodwin and City of Melbourne, who supported initial development phases. This work is dedicated to the memory of the late, great John Nixon, without whose support it would not be possible. I'm joined for this conversation by Zoë Bastin and Philipa Rothfield. We'll be discussing ideas of gender and performativity, orientation and desire, and the strategies engaged through that which was once familiar to deviate from binaries. Zoë is an artist, curator, sometimes writer, and self-described rat bag. As an artist who makes performances, sculptures, videos, photos, and runs a radio show, she's fascinated by the porousness of the body, where it starts and ends, and how culture inscribes ideas of gender and sexuality onto our female physical form. Since childhood, she has been fascinated by gender roles in dance class, particularly who's allowed to do what and why. Philipa is a writer, reviewer, and occasional dancer. She is creative advisor at Dancehouse and co-editor of the Dancehouse Diary, co-author of Practicing with Deleuze, Design, Dance, Art, Writing, Philosophy, and has just published Dance and the Corporeal Uncanny, Philosophy in Motion. She has recently completed a Culture Lab residency at Arts House, collaborating with Priya Srinivasan on an upcoming intercultural feminist collaboration entitled S3. So would you like to begin by talking through the conceptual thinking behind the work?
Yes, I can try. Thanks, Jess. And thank you everyone who is here. So many of you have contributed to this project in big and small ways, and I'm very grateful for all the support I've had in making That Which Was Once Familiar, especially being here at Chunky this last week. It's been a very fruitful time. This project started in 2018 and was originally going to be part of my PhD submission, which I had to finish in lockdown last year. And I guess I had a bit of a hunch about how the gender binary of like male and female and masculine and feminine tropes are kind of enforced in traditional forms of dancing. And that kind of started at a Carols by Candlelight with my mum. I don't know when that was, I'm looking at mum, maybe in 2018, and we were watching this group of teenagers, yeah, she remembers now, group of teenagers do like jazz, tap and ballet kind of style stuff. It was a little bit funky. They had tiny leotards on. They weren't even teenagers, they were probably 11 or 12-year-olds. And the movements they were doing were so sexualized, and they were all doing exactly the same thing and exactly the same timing, and we both felt pretty uncomfortable watching it. And I guess it's kind of started this train of trying to find ways to move that don't have this kind of rigid sense of this is how you dance and this is the kind of feminine body you have to perform to be able to dance, which was the beginning of this work.
And Philipa, would you like to expand on how the notion of binary difference has been treated as a problem within feminism?
So probably many of you'll look like full-on feminists, so you're probably very clear on the problem with gender difference and the problem with patriarchy and the way in which difference is policed, the way in which difference is hierarchised. So if you have difference, like difference was a thing in anthropology, there's nothing wrong with difference, but it's about the relation between the terms of difference and then the rigidity around these notions of difference. So what are the terms and are they mutable? And so the thing with feminism is, yes, it's about male and female and the status of female or the status of woman, both in relation to man, but also in relation to society and institutions and codes and modes of representation and ways of looking, and ultimately modes of agency, which is kind of what you're looking at. And so there's a history within feminism working with a critique of the sex-gender distinction, where it was thought that like sex is some kind of fixed thing and gender's socially mutable. And then you had someone like Judith Butler comes along and says, but what's even this sex business? Is that absolutely free of gender? No, like we're all just stuck with these ways of seeing things. So I think that is a question in making a work, is not only finding modes of agency and looking at the way in which the body kind of features within that, but also modes of spectatorship, how we see things. And then like with the music, which was really beautiful, congratulations, and congratulations to the dancers too. How tonality and affect really affects how you see things. So, you know, like that whole beginning with the sort of, is it Swan Lake? And, you know, just, and then...
Is it
the Dying Swan?
Dying Swan.
Thank you. Helen can do it too, I know. So, but it just... yeah, it's, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but just like how gravity works in all this as well, the force of gravity. Is gravity sexualised?
Oh, I like this question. This is interesting.
Anyway, I do digress, but just to say you could do a shortcut into all these notions of difference and gender difference through the notion of queer, which is a kind of destabilising term. And, you know, with trans as well, there's a kind of real questionings of oppositions, fixity, role of the body, mutability, and then strategies of kind of decentering or change or destabilisation or redoing, undoing.
Some deviation. I like using that word. It makes me feel a little bit sneaky or something.
Coming back to that notion you just picked up on of spectatorship, and I guess bringing it towards living in an embodied way, I'm wondering if either of you would like to talk to how gender has been inscribed on our bodies.
Yeah, I think spectatorship is really interesting to me, and like going back to this kind of like first memory of watching these kids performing on stage and feeling very uncomfortable in being put in a position as the audience to objectify and sexualize young bodies who didn't have any agency or volition in how they were moving, and then how that was being seen. Like we were really given this like language of movement, and these kids really doing things that they didn't have heaps of control over. And I think in trying to kind of problematize this idea that for a dance work you're kind of given a story that's shown through movement, I was really interested in how us as dancers could push back a little bit from that objectification or that like wanting to be looked at. And I don't think in the bit that you all just saw, I don't think we look at the audience at all, because I wanted to show you how we do something, not tell you directly. Yeah, I guess I didn't want to return your gaze.
I guess you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah. I'm sure they feel like they're working for me, but I'm doing it for myself. Yeah.
So I want to say two things about inscription. One is there's a way of thinking about inscription through someone like Michel Foucault in a book, Discipline and Punish, and he's got a thing about docile bodies, and he looks at the way in which practices, social practices, affect us and create a sense of self, if you like. And so, you know, dance training might be one, or some of these codes or the practices that the young kids were dancing. What you do is not just something that comes from the outside on you, but it actually produces something in you. So that's one kind of sense of inscription. And I think for dancers, the whole issue of practice, what you do, what a body does, is so key. And it's not like you just do it a bit, it's your life. It's a lot of moving and moving in certain ways, and then that produces something in you. That's one side. And then, well, just to add a bit there, that for Foucault, it's not just something coming from the outside, but it also creates skill and capacity and possibility. So training isn't just like stomping you down. You learn and you're able to do things. So at the same time as you're kind of engaging in a mode of practice that's creating something in you, you can do something. So like you're drawing on so much in doing this, but to what extent are these practices limiting? And then so that was one thread. And then the other thread, which comes through Elizabeth Gross, she talks about, it's a mouthful, but she talks, this term is strategic counter reinscription, which is, I'm sure she'd use a better form of words now, but it's basically, how can we do something else? How can we do that through practice? And I think that's like a really key moment of the power of your work and the germ of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think doing something else, trying to do something different, coming to my kind of feminist aha moment of, oh yeah, I can still dance and make my own work, but I would like to do it in a way that's politically engaged, and I would like to do it in a way where I feel comfortable being queer and out and in my own work and performing with my own body. And I would like to leave some of the legacies that I was taught that have made me feel shame behind. But like, where do you start trying to do something new when you are always moving? Like the body is constantly moving through life, and as we move, we layer gestures, and dance training layers extremely specific gestures over and over and over again. And even the training that I did in creative dance taught me particular ways of moving, which we'll talk about with one of the dancers, Suhaki, a little bit later. And I wanted to kind of leave all of this stuff behind, but I also needed some of it. I needed to know how to turn quickly and use momentum, and I needed to keep the bits that did give me agency in moving and let me move through. So then you have this language and you're trying to kind of position the language that you use differently.
So it's sort of like there's two problems, because like everything that brings you today is your wherewithal, and the other problem is you're never outside of that.
Yes. And I'm also, then I'm asking a group of other bodies to do that for me, and they come with their own languages and with their own histories and with their own ways of moving and their own discipline. And most of the dancers have done a lot of ballet, heaps. Some of them still do ballet. And they have to work out how to reorient their own languages to a different aim to be able to do what I'm asking them to do. And it's like another layer of inscription through another person.
What methods for working through modes of inscription can be used to keep that training space as a safe space?
That's a good question. I think we talk a lot in rehearsals. I think I ask them for their opinion a lot. I think I work more collaboratively than other choreographers I've worked for. Or like, I think I work more I don't know. I think I do. I ask them to talk to me. I ask them questions constantly. I ask them for feedback. And dancing in this work means that it's a lot less hierarchical because they have to tell me what to do sometimes, which kind of means that I don't always feel like the boss, which is good for all of us. And then I think I never demonstrate and ask them to do what I've just done. I give them an instruction, I give them a prompt, I give them an image, I give them an idea. But the reason the whole work is improvised is because they perform it in their own way. They do what I ask them to do, how they want to do it. And it's strict in terms of timing. And yesterday we did like 4 hours of how are your hands in this bit. It was excruciatingly specific. But how they come to do it is still from themselves.
Yeah, so it's giving them that agency from the get-go. So taking a quote from your PhD, I will be thinking through queer ways to escape being a subject and or being objectified, to find strategies to become a thing instead. Would you like to discuss how queerness comes into the project?
Sure. I guess doing my PhD and writing my thesis was really a process of me coming out into the world, and I had to do that quite publicly because I put it into my research, and then I had to give conference papers under queer banners, and everyone kind of found out. But it was important because it changed the way that I worked. It changed my methodology because I learn a lot about, I guess when we're talking about inscription, we were talking about orientation, what the work is directed towards and what it's trying to do. And I grew up in a world where the kind of straight and narrow path was very specific, and where I felt like I was expected to walk down that path in a very specific way. And also, I didn't see anybody that danced in non-male female partnerships. It wasn't part of my vision of how I could grow up because there was no representation. I didn't know any queer choreographers, and I didn't see that that could be my future. Where am I going? Because I didn't know that it could exist, I was trying to kind of hide parts of myself to do the thing that I did know how to do. So then, yeah, I guess it became part of the work because it became a really big part of my life.
Yeah, well, I think you have one of those practices where the making of the work is as much the making of the self, I think.
Or a remaking of the self.
And sometimes a breaking down to remake. Yeah.
There's a lot of transformative themes that happen, and I tend
As happens in a PhD.
As happens in a PhD.
But I do think, like, if you're trying to make a work that is trying to shift things, so it's not necessarily self-expression, that you were there and then you express yourself in something, but it's like becoming different through making and creating, and that's part of art, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it relies heavily on the process. Like, I didn't know how I was going to come to be able to have a conversation like this a year and a half ago when I first wrote it into a grant, until I got here, because it was about the doing, and it was such an experiment. That which was once familiar, I had this crazy idea that we might be able to kind of overcome some of our ideas about our own gender and express that through dance. But I didn't know if it was going to work. So you got to...
Which is great.
Yeah. I quite like being experimental.
Well, what would it be to do something that you already know? I mean, that's just very boring. And if you're pushing back against something, or you have a critique of something, and then you're trying to find ways, you're inventing ways. So the invention is something that happens in situ. It's not something that you know beforehand. So like the scientific model's weird, you have a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis, and then you confirm the hypothesis, but it's different with art making.
Yeah, it's different, but I think it still requires having all the things set up, like a contingent environment. Like it wasn't really until we got here where I could see the whole work, and I had all the dancers for a week, and I had this space and so many people to support me and do emails. Thank you. So that I could kind of focus on the work and see if it worked.
So focus, rigour. It's not like this is anything. So it's just there's a degree of unknowing, but then there's also a really crystalline rigour in working with the body and working with movement and working with the ideas, and then also finding out, or kind of what you don't know yet. There's the futurity, the futureness of it.
Yeah, on my wall in my studio it says "coming to know," and I have a big arrow. I haven't got there yet, but I'm always on the journey, going in a certain direction.
Well, I think from watching so many of the rehearsals, it's also the talking through, and sometimes verbally, but more so talking through with your bodies, with the other dancers, and it's that open conversation that is the thing that is the catalyst for the work, and it's posing more questions than answers, which is what good work does, I think. Philipa, would you like to discuss how ideas of the monstrous feminine and femme can be tools for breaking down binaristic thinking around
I think
dance?
that was your question.
Oh, is that your question? Oh, sorry. Anyone can jump in. It's a hard one.
Oh, it is a hard one.
But wasn't there the paper?
Yes, there's this paper. There's this paper that I'm obsessed with. Anne Harris and Stacey Holman-Jones, who are both queer theorists who live in Melbourne, wrote a paper together about the monstrous feminine in terms of queerness, and how queer desire can render us monsters. And Stacey Holman-Jones talks about this idea of the monstrous femme being in the reveal of queerness. So in passing, most of the time, it's when you kind of tell people that you get rendered a monster. It's in the act of disclosure and of coming out. And do you want to talk about the monstrous feminine?
Well, then, so the other side of that, because when I heard that, I was thinking of Barb Creed, who's a feminist film theorist, and she wrote a book called The Monstrous Feminine, and she was looking at the status of the monster in films like Alien and Aliens, and its kind of association with femininity, and she uses ideas from Freud for Freud it was like this sort of phallocentric idea of the sort of penis and the mark of the penis being such a kind of central thing. And for Freud, it's like looking at female genitals was like the horror of there's no phallus there. And so Barb Creed was sort of looking at film and horror film and the way in which the feminine, the way in which she talks about the vagina dentata. She talks about in Alien, I'm sure you've all seen Aliens, it's a fabulous film, but not you, Alice, but there's this cavern and it's all with these really creepy eggs. So it's really this sort of fear of female fecundity and reproduction. So it's that also relates to Julia Kristeva's work on the powers of horror and the way in which the kind of borders and edges of subjectivity, which I think, coming back to what you're talking about, is what is monstrous about a reveal of queerness? Is it at the borders of the known world of heterosexual normativity? And it's something about a transgression of that, or abjecting the one who is on the other side.
Yeah. And the objecting and the ways in which you that causes kind of alienation or like distance, I think I was really interested in, because I have been taught and expected to perform a feminine kind of good girl trope in terms of like how society constructs, or like how society kind of conditioned me. But also I think my experience at art school, which was very specific, I was taught by a lot of middle-aged men who didn't heaps like me and the leaky sculptures I made and how much space I took up and how outspoken I am and loud most of the time. And I think like I really felt that kind of pushback, and then it was really helpful to lean into it and be like, okay, if I'm a monster, if you see me as monstrous, then let's really get monstrous. Let's get out, which is the middle section of this work that you didn't see today. We get very angry and very loud, and there's a big live electric guitar. Kind of really
I'm looking forward
push
to
back.
that.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time.
As an antithesis to angry and loud, I think this is a nice moment to bring up Sue Hockey, who is one of the dancers in the work. So Sue also happens to have been Zoe's mentor and teacher since childhood. And Philipa, I'll just get you to share your microphone with Sue. Oh, she's up here. Sue has been a professional dancer for over 50 years. She began her dance experience under the tutelage of her mother, founder of Mangala Creative Dance, and became principal of the children's section of Mangala Studios in 2006. Sue, would you like to talk about your experience of gender in teaching?
I don't. There was none, because what we wanted was that children, from a very young age, to offer something of themselves. So it comes from them, whether they're a male or a female. That was fine, and we wanted them to transform into the music by us presenting various images, thoughts, props, poems, artistic works, paintings, and we wanted them to be inspired by the other dancers, whoever they were, and be able to connect to whoever they are at any time during the dance. So various age groups, you notice that the boys go over here and the girls go over here, and we push that right out. I've particularly about 6 and 7 it starts, and I just stop the music and I say, this isn't how we do things here. It's not about whether you're a boy or a girl. We need to learn just to dance, be dancers, and present what we can offer to this music and to this situation. And look at it, because I insisted at that age, no problem. They understand, they get a lovely feeling for each other, they do partner work, they do three together, they do whatever I ask, and sometimes it's just random, like the whole group just dancing, connecting later on in the class, and it's really important that they see each other as important human beings offering something to this class and not as a male or a female. And we actually teach a very physical class, not with put your hand there and put your leg there, but very clear ideas, and some of it's choreographed in a certain way, but it's about tone, understanding the individual dancers and responding to the group. So it's a very important part of what we did.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah, so good. Yeah.
Beautiful answer. What questions, and this is for anyone who wants to answer, what questions or should we ask or challenges should we be posing to choreographers or dance makers?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think there was some question we might have been talking about, or maybe this is it. I wouldn't want to tell a choreographer to do anything, actually. Like, I think people, when they make work, they can be informed by something or informed by ideas, and I love working with ideas and I'm really happy to address them, but I wouldn't want to give an agenda at all to someone who makes art. I'm delighted that Zoe is such an ardent feminist and wanting to really kick-ass gender codes, and I love meeting you and talking about it, and I'm thrilled to see the work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the whole one. But it's more like a dialogue rather than some kind of, telling anyone to do anything artistically. But I did think there was something I saw, probably it was before COVID, someone did something and it looked a little bit problematic from a point of view of, I don't know, racism or anti-Semitism, and I was quite sensitive to that. But then that would be a question of talking to the person about their work. Sometimes there are issues and you want to talk to someone about a work or whatever, but no telling from me.
And so, taking another quote from your PhD, dance is not the process of a body moving in space, but the combined forces of that body's materiality meeting and responding to the world. We are always moving. Dance just puts brackets around how we move for a certain amount of time. To finish today's discussion, would you like to speak to how dance coalesces with all aspects of your life?
Ooh. With all aspects of my life, yes, because it lets me talk about Sioux hockey. So I started dancing at Mangala, I'm going to look at my mum again, when I was 18 months old. 9 months old. 9 months old. 9-month-old babies can dance. There you go. There you go. Thanks, Mum. Mum's not a dancer. She saw it in me young, though. And then I did classes at Mangala until I was about 16, and then I couldn't afford to pay for classes anymore, so Sioux Hockey gave me a job. And we taught children's classes at least twice a week for about 10 years, and I kept dancing. And it is the one thing that I have always done. It's the only thing that I've always done. And until a couple of years ago, it was at Mangala, which is, I'm going to try not to cry, which is an amazing place. It used to be an amazing place. It doesn't exist in the same way anymore, but I had something that was kind of stable in my life that I could go back to, where I was allowed to be me and I was allowed to move however I wanted, and I was welcomed and uplifted and able to kind of express myself creatively, which let me process and get through a lot of the other things that were going on in my quite chaotic life. I had this thing, I had this practice that I could come back to, that now I get to do every day. And it brings me places like this, and it has let me know so many of you, and it lets me have conversations about big ideas. And it also always brings me joy. There's always a part where you get through it and you find why you like dancing again.
I also think that even though she did the creative dance for so long and the yoga, it's still, she needed the technique, you know, to incorporate or to inspire her in by various artists that she was able to dance in their classes. Because in the end, we all need a little bit of technique and perhaps quite a bit of technique, but the feelings are hard to get if it's just technique. So I think the combination's invaluable. That's my opinion.
And now's a good time if anyone has a question from the audience. Are there any questions? Yeah, I just need a mic.
A mic because I don't think we'll hear. Okay, cool. Well then I'll nick this mic.
You can borrow mine.
I haven't fully formed it, Zoe, but I'd just like to know if in the process of, you've talked about this work wanting to create something new, and I always think there's a degree of danger in that word myself, but what about the reflection back? Because I was thinking, have you looked at the historical thing of, you know, the Yvonne Rainer and Judson Church? Because watching this, I'm not watching something new necessarily, which doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, but it's not necessarily new, but in the way that Yvonne challenged how bodies were seen.
Yes.
Is that a good question for
That's
you?
a great question. And I love her very, very much. I wrote about Raina for a good whole chapter of my thesis, and she's very important to me because of the ways she took this idea of everyday movement into a performance space. And I think I'm really drawing from her when I was talking before about how we layer gestures and how we layer movement, and how, because we are moving all the time, how movement is inscribed on our body is a continual process that's always happening. I stole that from her. And also the gaze. Also rejecting the gaze and rejecting the expectation that you, as a performer, you need to return a gaze or even perform for an audience rather than just doing something. I also like an artist who was around at a similar time, who's still making work. I'm going to say her name wrong though. Merle Lederman Ukeles, who's also based in New York. And she did a work where she shook all the trash, rubbish workers' hands in New York. She also did beautiful garbage truck choreography. And she is a passionate feminist as well. And she said, "My working will be the work." And I think, I don't know if it's an expectation in performance. It's an expectation I feel that as a performer, I need to offer something substantial and I need to give you something to take away with you. But discovering their work and thinking through that kind of 1970s feminist bent, which is very much the household I was raised in. Thanks, Mum. Doing it is enough. Doing the work and having that be seen is the work. And I think when I started to reject the idea that I had to do it and then I had to perform it and then I had to put on a show, the work got a lot more interesting because you are let into the process of us working it out, and you're let into how we all, me and my 5 amazing dancers, dance differently and solve problems differently. And although I asked them to do the same thing, they're not doing it the same way. So it was very important. Did I answer your question?
In part.
Okay.
Also just historically to locate your work.
Ah, right, sorry.
So that there is a continuum and a
Sure.
belonging from that. It's not just the 70s and now, that there's a whole tradition and practice that continues.
So there's a
One of
through
my
line.
feelings is that my work is not specifically about, well actually I think it's a lot about gender, in fact. Questioning gender all the time.
Yes. So there's that. My through line artistically is very much Sue, and Sue's mother, who immigrated here from Germany, who in Germany was taught by Mary Wigman, that kind of comes out of a German expressionist movement in quite a direct way, and the way that I was taught how to take inspiration from ideas and put things together from that kind of world, which is, you know, painting theory mostly applied to movement. And then I studied sculpture for 9.5 years. And I was taught by a lot of minimalists. I was taught by a lot of people who were around in the Judson Church era who were on the other side. And I got really interested in object making practices that were pretty maximalist and rejected a lot of the ideas of the well-built and straight lines and getting into the performance of objects and when objects are stable and unstable. So my artistic line is a little bit different. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're at time. So today wouldn't have been possible without Shannon Goodwin, Director of Bus Projects, Josh Wright, Director of Dancehouse, Patrick Hayes from Midsummer, Penny Kiprianu from City of Yarra, and all the wonderful creatives that have been involved in this project so far, in particular the dancers Sue Hockey, Alja Fomenko, Hayley Doze, Julia Luby and Tazana Saunders. That Which Was Once Familiar will be showing at Dancehouse from April 28th until May 1st, and tickets can be purchased through the Dancehouse and Midsummer websites. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for coming. Thank you.